It all started on that fateful day 2 years ago. I still remember how it went with Oliver, my brother's best friend, so close to me. We were drunk, but that touch was mind-altering. After a party and drunk out of my wits, I kissed my brother's best friend, and 2 years later, I haven't forgotten anything about that. My older brother's best friend, Oliver, was anything I could think about. No matter if it has been more than 2 years since that happened, that kiss still haunted my dreams. Truth to be told, my feelings for Oliver had existed within me longer than that. Ever since we were children, I had a crush on him, so when I finally got to kiss him at a party when I was 18, I thought all my dreams were coming true. How wrong I was. After that event, Oliver became distant, avoiding me every chance he got. Eventually, my brother, Theo, moved out of the house to another city because of work, and a couple of months later, Oliver also left town to be my brother's roommate. I hadn't properly talked to him in those 2 years since that kiss, but that was just about to change as I was standing in front of my brother's apartment, hesitating to knock. When he invited me to spend the holidays at his, I had Oliver in mind when I accepted. I was dreading it, but at the same time, I wanted to see him again. "Liam!" Theo exclaimed as soon as he opened the doors. He extended both of his arms and gave me a tight hug. "How have you been?" "Good," I answered. "I've missed you." "Aw, you are such a sap." He teased me, but I could see him blink a couple of times, getting emotional. He was the real sap. I rolled my eyes. "What about you?" "Yeah, everything's been chill. I've been waiting for you here all day, just playing games with Oliver." As soon as he mentioned him, Theo turned around towards the living room where the man I was terrified to meet again was casually standing, with both hands in his pockets. I wasn't sure what to say, so I stood there awkwardly staring at him. "Hey, Liam." He smiled at me before closing his distance and hugging me. It was quicker than Theo's, but it made me feel some type of way. "It's been a long time." "Yeah, it's been a long time," I whispered, still a little shocked by his casual and warm behavior. After sitting down and conversing with my brother, he eventually suggested we drink. It started light with a couple of beers, but we eventually began downing some shots. Before I knew it, I was already pretty drunk. Oliver was quiet, which was strange for him, but he was also drinking. A lesser amount than me for sure. "I'm so single," Theo mumbled after finishing another shot. I didn't even remember how we got to this topic. "There's nothing wrong with being single," Oliver countered with a shrug. "Easy for you to say." Theo got up from his seat and pointed a cursory finger towards Oliver. "Oh, he was drunk. Mr. Playboy. I don't know what you mean." He scratched his head and looked the other way, while taking another sip of his beer. Sure. You play dumb, but you probably have kissed every single person back home." My brother accused him, smiling conspiratorially. That made me giggle. I was already aware of Oliver's reputation. He was known in town as a playboy who would never settle, always with a new partner every other week. I had already made peace with his information long ago. Plus, the alcohol made me not care about his history. I found it funny. "Yeah, he has," I finally interjected in the conversation, still laughing. I can confirm that. Oliver's eyes got so big with surprise, and instead of thinking anything of it, I just found it amusing. He looked really cute with that expression. I know this because Oliver has even kissed... "Hey," Oliver talked over me quickly. "Why don't we eat some snacks? I'm getting a little hungry." "Why did you interrupt?" I started asking, but when I saw his stern expression, I knew I had to stop. "I love snacks," Theo claimed before getting up and dancing in excitement. He was too drunk to have noticed the tension between Oliver and me, which was for the better. The next day, I opened my eyes, feeling a terrible headache and an achy throat. Last night, Theo insisted on doing some karaoke, which I obviously had to partake in. After a couple of hours of off-pitch singing, Theo went to pass out in his room and I took my place on their living room couch. "Good morning," Oliver said. I jumped from the couch and quickly sat up. When I turned, I saw Oliver sitting on the couch in front of mine. I could see that he had already taken a shower and was in a cool outfit. Embarrassment filled me when I looked at my pajamas and discreetly I tried to fix my hair. "Good morning," I answered back. "What an early bird you are." "Well, it's past 2 p.m. I wouldn't say it's exactly early." he countered. He pointed towards the coffee table. Theo left that for you. It was a pill, probably for my headache, and a glass of water. He is at work? Yes, left a couple of hours ago. It was crazy to me how he could drink so much and just wake up the next like nothing. He had always been like that. Theo didn't know what being hangover was, and I envied him for it. By the way, about yesterday, he started, clearing his throat. It was strange seeing him hesitate like that. Theo doesn't know. I looked at him, a little confused now. What are you talking about? The kiss, he clarified. He doesn't know, and I would like to keep it that way. Why? I laughed, thinking he was joking because I didn't think it was such a big deal if he were to find out. I just don't want him to know. He looked down, and I knew I wouldn't get a proper answer out of him. I pondered for a second, and an idea popped into my mind. Fine, I won't tell on one condition. Oliver looked at me almost offended. Blackmail? Really? Oh, really? I smiled at him cheekily. He rolled his eyes. What do you want? Be my tour guide, I asked. My brother still had work for a couple of days, so it seemed convenient to just have him show me around. Plus, I was going to spend more time with him. Just the days Theo's busy, so I don't die of boredom here. Oliver looked confused for a second, and then a huge amused smile appeared on his face. Tour guide? Yeah, it's not that bad, right? Come on. Fine. We have a deal, you punk. I laughed at the nickname. He used to call me that when we were children, so it was inevitable to feel a nostalgic warmth in my chest. 3 hours later. I walked next to Oliver as he showed me around town. The more he talked to me, the more I realized how my feelings for him were as strong as ever. It was difficult to care about our surroundings when the only thing my eyes could focus on was Oliver. So what else do you want to do today? Oliver asked, bringing me out of my thoughts. I looked at him flustered. We could have dinner. We could. What do you want to eat? Mexican, I answered in a heartbeat. That was Oliver's favorite food, and I wanted to make him happy. His mouth opened, and then it closed. A knowing smile appeared on his face. Isn't Mexican food spicy for you? I'll power through. I winked at him, and Oliver immediately looked away. That unexpected shyness surprised me, but I didn't say anything. A few hours later. After we finished eating, we headed towards the apartment. Night had already fallen, and we were under the stars talking about trivial things. Oliver could talk about the most normal thing ever, and I would listen to him all day. Before I knew it, we were already in front of his building. I paused for a moment, hesitating because I didn't want the moment to end. So I said my thoughts out loud. What are you saying? Oliver asked, sounding confused. I don't want to go inside, I repeated myself. You want to freeze out here? He looked at me as if I were crazy. Well, I wouldn't mind if that meant that I get to spend more time with you, I answered truthfully. He started to shake his head multiple times, like he disapproved of my words, but the huge smile on his face said otherwise. When did you become such a smooth talker? Learned from the best. I'd love to meet that guy. He sounds great. He played dumb. I loved it when he acted silly. Oh, he is the best. He is hot too, I added, arching an eyebrow. Shut up. He nudged me with his shoulder. He looked shy, and a shiver ran through my body. I'd never seen him like that. Oliver, you... Guys, what are you doing here? It was Theo's voice, and he had just returned from work. Nothing, Oliver answered quickly. Nothing at all. I looked at him before giggling. He was not being smooth at all now. All right, let's get inside now, boys. The next day. It was another day with just the two of us. This time, I insisted on doing some mini-golfing. I thought it'd be fun and Oliver would love it, given his competitive nature, and I was right. He did. He got riled up, cheered whenever he got a ball in, and laughed loudly whenever I failed. Since I wasn't the competitive type, I didn't mind at all. Actually, I loved it. I was happy he was enjoying himself. Maybe next time you'll get to my level, he teased me once we were out of that place. Of course he had won. Oh wow, don't make me cry. I rested my hand on my chest, pretending he hurt my feelings. Oh shut up. He laughed loudly. By the way, I'll take you on that one. I put my arm around him. He looked at my arm and then with me with a questioning look on his face. What do you mean? You said next time I'll get on your level. I repeated his words and smiled at him. So that means there will be a next time. Oliver rolled his eyes at me. It's a promise, so you can't back out now. He huffed like he was in disbelief, but I could still see a faint blush on his cheeks. My hand reached for his face and he stood still, almost dazzled. He looked so cute like that. Look at you, I said before pinching his cheek, wanting to tease him even more. You're so annoying, he complained while grabbing his cheek. Let's just go. Theo is probably home already. Now it was my turn to roll my eyes. I didn't understand how my brother always found a way to interrupt us. The next day, unfortunately, Oliver was busy and had to leave. I was alone in the apartment for a couple of hours, thinking it was a shame since today was my brother's last day at work before he was free. I wouldn't have any more time alone with Oliver, and that made me feel like I had lost my chance. So when Oliver came back, it was only natural for me to practically jump him. Oliver! I welcomed him as soon as he opened the door. Oh, hey Liam. Let's go out. I grabbed him by the hand and pulled him. Oliver laughed, looking justly confused. What? Right now? Yes, right now. But Theo is coming back soon. I sighed when he mentioned my brother. Of course, that's exactly why I wanted to hang out with you alone. This is our last time before our little agreement is done. He looked into my eyes as I practically batted my eyelashes at him, begging. He sighed, now acting defeated. Fine. I hugged him and I was surprised when he hugged me back. Even though I convinced him, Oliver still insisted it was a little late to go somewhere far, especially with Theo coming back soon. We ended up walking around the park until we found some swings. I immediately ran excitedly like a kid to them. Oliver laughed at me but followed after me. We swung for a while, laughing and competing to see who would go higher. It felt nostalgic, like the good old times. This is nice, I said once we were tired and out of breath. We had to stop swinging and we were just sitting there. Yeah, he agreed with me. I looked at him and thought to myself that he looked beautiful. Oliver? Yes? I missed you. Oliver inhaled deeply and took a moment before answering. Me too. My hand grabbed the chain of his swing and pulled him closer towards me. What are you doing? Even though he asked, he had an amused smile on his face. He knew exactly what I was doing. Oliver, I ignored his question and looked him deep into his eyes. Why did you start avoiding me after the kiss? His smile dropped from his face and he closed his eyes, probably thinking about his answer. I just thought I had messed it up. Messed up how? He didn't answer and looked down. Were you scared? I tried again, whispering gently. Even though that seemed unlikely, I had to ask. Oliver had always been bold, but again, this week I had seen so much of him, sides I hadn't seen before. He finally looked me in the eyes, and his hand went to rest on top of mine on the chain. Despite not answering, his eyes told me everything I needed to know. Well, please don't be scared now. That's the only thing I said before giving him a small peck on his lips, testing the waters. His eyes darkened and my breath got caught in my throat. His hands reached for my neck and he kissed me passionately. I couldn't help but smile against his lips. When we separated, he brushed my hair back and gently kissed my forehead. My heart was thumping in my chest. Let's go back, it's late, he whispered before reaching his hand out to me. Without hesitation, I grabbed it. We held hands all the way back home and we walked in. I didn't expect Oliver to push me against the wall and kiss me again, but I deeply appreciated it. He pushed me towards the couch, his lips still on mine. We were tangled on each other when we heard the key unlock the door. Oliver panicked and pushed me off the couch. I quickly fixed my hair while I sat up on the floor. Hey guys, I'm back. What are you doing? Theo asked as soon as he walked in. Oliver cleared his throat and shrugged. Just talking. Yeah, that. I looked between them, feeling disappointed. I brought Chinese, guys, Theo said while holding two big plastic bags with an excited smile on his face. No single trace of suspicion was present in his eyes. While we were eating, Oliver was acting so casual with Theo that I started to question myself if what had happened was real. My heart was still racing, and I could barely hear whatever Theo was rambling about. My hand reached for Oliver's under the table, looking for reassurance, but he quickly pushed me off. He looked at me and shook his head at me, almost mouthing a no. That pained me. "What's up, Liam?" Theo asked me with his mouth full. "You've been kinda quiet." "Nothing," I answered, and realized how little convincing I sounded, so I added, "Just been tired." The next day, my mind couldn't stop thinking about all the times my brother came between Oliver and me. He didn't mean it, but I still felt his impact on the development of our relationship. The truth is, I didn't understand the need to hide our feelings. Theo had always been an open-minded and relaxed person to whom I could always tell everything. I didn't get why Oliver made such a big deal about it with Theo. If we liked each other, we didn't have to hide it at all. But every time I approached Oliver, he avoided my eyes and my touch whenever Theo was close, which was always. Without being able to stop it, my mind started to overthink, and suddenly I became way too aware of the way they were standing close to each other, or how they always knew what the other was going to say half-sentence. I observed as my brother grabbed Oliver's face or wrapped his hand around his shoulders like it was second nature to him. Oliver never questioning it, never denying him. What bugged me the most was how happy and giggly Oliver was with Theo. On the other hand, with me, he was more quiet and reserved, which all this time I attributed him feeling shy or embarrassed. But what if it was not the case? What if I just didn't make him happy like Theo did? Self-doubt started crushing me, and it was suffocating me. "I'm going to go for drinks," I screamed through the loud music. Theo had insisted on taking us clubbing, but I didn't have the proper space in mind. I needed to get away for a moment. "You guys want anything?" "More shots!" Theo screamed back, not stopping his silly dancing. He was already super drunk. "All right, buddy." I clapped his shoulder and laughed a little. "What about you?" I got closer to Oliver and said it directly into his ear. He flinched slightly, just enough for me to notice, and he peered towards Theo, who was already watching us, his eyes a little lost. He laughed awkwardly. "No, I'm already too drunk." I walked towards the bartender and asked for another beer, completely ignoring Theo's request. I leaned against the bar counter and looked towards Theo and Oliver, only to find Oliver already looking at me. I winked at him and smiled. Oliver just smiled back, shaking his head disapprovingly. His eyes left mine when Theo said something in his ear. I felt a drop in my stomach when Oliver flushed profusely. Oliver didn't try to pull back, but Theo grabbed him by the neck anyway. Oliver separated himself from my brother, got a hold of Theo's shoulders, and said something to him that was impossible for me to decipher, but they both looked serious. Finally, they nodded their heads in agreement and hugged for what to me felt like too long. Angry, I downed my whole beer and disappeared into the dancing crowd. I didn't even know how much time had passed or how many shots I ended up having while I danced surrounded by unknown bodies when someone pulled me by the shoulder. I turned around just to find Oliver looking at me with an almost passed out Theo hanging by his arm. "Jesus, Liam, I've been looking for you everywhere," he said in my ear. "Well, you found me. Good job." A cheeky smile appeared on my face. I was definitely tipsy. He looked at me strangely, like there was something wrong with me. But that had to be impossible because I felt great. "Let's go home. I already called the Uber." I looked at him and then my eyes went to Theo, who had been rambling inaudible things all this time. He looked back without saying anything. I followed him outside. The ride back home was quiet if you didn't take into consideration Theo's occasional noises. Before Oliver could start a conversation, I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. All the anger and sadness that I tried to bury inside me earlier was resurfacing within me. Once we arrived, I didn't even bother helping Oliver carry a shaky Theo. I couldn't stand seeing them together like that. The whispering, the laughing, and the hugging were too much for me. They always had been close like that, and I never thought anything of it, not until now. "One more shot, please, Ollie," Theo begged in a small voice. "Okay, dude, just rest," Oliver said to Theo as he was laying him down on his bed. I didn't help, I just leaned against the frame door watching them. Theo pulled on Oliver's arm, making him lose balance and fall on top of him. Both of them laughing, and I just couldn't witness that anymore. I huffed and walked away to the living room. Oliver followed after a couple of minutes and sat on the couch across from mine. I ignored his presence as I took my shirt off, preparing myself to sleep. "Is something wrong?" Oliver asked. I stayed quiet. You've been acting strange since yesterday. You even disappeared for a while, and Oliver, I interrupted him. Yes? What are we doing here? Excuse me? He sounded so confused. I'm asking, what are we doing here? I turned around to look at him as he stood up, because I'm not interested in whatever you are playing here. I'm not your toy. What do you mean by that? He asked in complete disbelief. Do you actually think I'm playing you? Well, that's all you do, right? I practically snarled at him. Or at least that's what everyone says back home. Do I have to remind you who approached who first? He jabbed his finger into my chest. I actually did my best to reject you, but you just wouldn't stop. I gazed at him, pained. In the back of my mind, I knew that I was like a boy in delusion following his long-lasting unrequited love. But having the truth hit me in the face, coming from him, was unbearable. Well, you can rest easy. I won't bother you anymore. I gave him my back, trying to conceal my pitiful face. Liam. He said my name so gently, and his hand reached for my shoulder, but as soon as I felt his touch on me, I shook it off. Can you leave? I'm tired. He hesitated for a second, but ultimately walked to his room. Days later. We both tried our best to act normal whenever we were in front of Theo, but when we were alone, we always found a good excuse to run away from each other. Pretty soon, my holidays were over just like that. It was my last night there, and Theo said goodbye to me before going to sleep. After all, I was going to leave really early in the morning. On the other hand, I hadn't seen Oliver the whole day as he spent all that time locked in his room. I tried to sleep, but my troubled mind didn't let me. It was impossible to stop thinking about Oliver and the pains of my unrequited love. I got up again, trying to stop my torture, and I paced around the apartment. That's when Oliver opened the door of his room. He looked surprised to see me awake. Trouble sleeping? Oliver asked. I was so surprised he spoke to me after all those years that I could barely just nod my head. Me too. His eyes looked me up and down, looking quite pensive. Follow me. I did what he said, and I found myself standing in the kitchen. Oliver opened the fridge and pulled out milk. What are you doing? I asked. Chocolate milk. A huge smile appeared on my face. Whenever we stayed up late when we were kids, we would always drink some chocolate milk. It was sweet, he remembered. Like good old times? Exactly. We drank our beverage in silence, eyeing each other and uncertain of what to say. So, he finally broke the silence. This is your last night. It is. Tomorrow you will be free of my existence. I tried to joke, but it came off more bitter than I intended to be. He inhaled deeply and glared at me before standing up. You know what? Yeah, you are right. I'm glad. I can't stand you anymore. Oh, really? You weren't saying that when we were making out. I snapped at him, also getting up from my stool. But of course, you could kiss anyone, right? Even me. His hand quickly covered my mouth and he looked towards the bedrooms. Be quiet, Theo could hear us. Theo this, Theo that. Jesus Christ, you always have him on your mind. It's because Theo... I couldn't bear to listen to him anymore, so I shut him up with a rash kiss. He stood completely still, which made me realize how silly I was behaving. But when I moved to put some distance between us, a pair of strong hands captured my face, continuing the kiss, this time more passionate. Oliver pushed me towards his room, his lips never leaving mine. The next day, I woke up, untangling myself from Oliver's naked body. I silently looked at Oliver's sleeping face for a moment, absorbing his placid expression and accepting the fact that this was the end. This had to be the accumulation of us and my feelings. I couldn't continue like this, being carried away by childish feelings that had tortured me for years. I needed to keep going, no matter how much it hurt. When I made my decision, I took my things and left the apartment. A week later. As days went by, the more difficult it seemed for me to fulfill my resolution. It was easy to say that I would forget Oliver, but doing so was quite a difficult task. I felt similar to how I felt after our first kiss 2 years ago. devastated and confused, but this time I felt much worse. The entire week since I returned home, I had spent my days looking at my cell phone, hoping that Oliver would call me. Sometimes I even fantasized that he would tell me that I was the only one he wanted to be by his side, but that seemed pretty impossible. That's why when the doorbell rang and I opened the door, my jaw dropped to the floor and I had to rub my eyes to understand that my mind wasn't playing tricks on me, showing me Oliver standing in front of me with a backpack on his shoulder. "Oliver, what are you doing here?" A huff escaped my lips out of disbelief. "I came to set things straight." He looked out of breath and disheveled. "First of all, answer me this honestly. Do you think I have feelings for Theo?" My mouth opened and then closed. I looked down at the floor, too embarrassed to say it out loud. "Thought so." He sighed. His hands went to grab mine. "That was never the case, and there's no possibility of that happening in the future. And I'm sorry I made you doubt like that." After he said those words, a breath of relief escaped my lips. It was true the idea was crazy, and now I even felt silly for even believing it. But still, there was confusion in my mind. "Then why were you acting so strange in front of him?" I said in a small voice, still scared of the answer. "Because a long time ago, Theo made me promise that I'd never make a move on his dear little brother." He laughed for a second, looking almost nostalgic. "He probably noticed the way I looked at you long before I realized myself." I blinked a couple of times, trying to process the information. "He even reminded me about that promise when we were at the club the other day." He looked down at our hands and he nervously played with the rings on my fingers. All this time, I felt like I was betraying him, hiding from him. I felt so shitty when we kissed 2 years ago, I just ran away. But I don't want to do that anymore. "Why would he make you promise that?" "Because he knew the truth, that you were too good for me. He was scared because of my history with relationships." "Don't be upset, he was trying to protect you." "Yeah, I know. But I've talked to him and everything is fine now. Don't worry about anything." I stayed quiet for a moment, thinking about Oliver's words. "When you said the way I looked at you, what do you mean?" "Come on, you know what I mean." He looked at me like it was obvious, and I did know, but I wanted to hear him say it. "There's no one like you who can make me as nervous and flustered as you. I can't stay far away from you, and whenever you ask for something, I cannot say no to you. And it's always been that way. You know why?" "Why?" I smiled, feeling my eyes tear up. "Because I like you." His face cradled my face and a single tear slipped down my cheek, which he gently cleaned. "I like you too. Always have." "I know," he whispered against my lips before kissing them. Some hours later, Oliver's arms surrounded me while he kissed my cheek and continued to talk to me about how happy he was to finally be able to be with me like this. I kissed his hand and cuddled close to his. "What did my brother say when you told him about us?" "Well, first he wanted my head on a stick." I cringed at that. He was so protective sometimes. After the initial anger, he threatened to kill me if I didn't treat you right. "Theo is so embarrassing sometimes." I hid my face on his neck. "Only sometimes?" We both laughed, but my smile died down when my mind started to overthink. "How are we going to make it work? With you over there and me studying here?" "I'm not scared of long distance, and you shouldn't either. We are going to make it work." "Promise?" "Promise." Conclusion. After that wonderful weekend, Oliver went back home, and even though it was difficult, we never let distance bring us apart. We called and FaceTimed every day, and whenever we were free, we visited each other. Theo was awkward and weird about us at the beginning, but eventually he came around. Now he was happy about us, or at least that's what he claimed in his drunk speeches, where he claimed how much he loved us and how we were perfect for each other. It was silly, but I agreed. It felt like we were able to bring out the best of the other. So much so, I decided to move to his city as soon as I was done with school. Oliver was more than excited when I told him my plan. The end. Were you ever interested in one of your brother's friends? Thank you guys for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force, and also go and check out our Ko-Fi page. Stay wholesome and stay awesome. See ya!